Buster Olney. Buster, were you surprised when he dropped that pearl on you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I that was about my fifth question, because I figured, well, he's probably done 15,000 updates on Sabathia and Carlos Beltran, and so I sort of structured my questions that I was asking other things. Oh, yeah, by the way, can you give us an update on Sabathia? And the way he laid it out, it was definitely an eye-opener, and with Carlos as well, where, because Carlos had told reporters over the weekend, look, if I need surgery in 6 to 8 weeks, and, based on what Brian was saying, because Carlos has to throw, and it's his throwing arm that's involved with this bone spur, 8 to 12 weeks. So that, and Brian, I think Brian's always more of, in terms of talking about injuries, let's talk about the realistic scenario instead of trying to, paint a glass half full thing. And I wondered with Sabathia whether or not this was eventually going to be what was going to be coming down the road, because when you're that big and that's, a knee that's so important to your delivery, that's a huge issue.
Now, Michael and I were just talking about what do you do, and the one thing we don't do on May 19th is make a trade. But if they wanted to do that, I mean, is there anybody even to get at this point?
Well, you could call, and that was actually one of my first questions to Brian, was about the current trade market if you want to solve issues. And he said, look, it's basically impossible to trade for guys before the amateur draft, which starts on June 5th this year. You could theoretically call the Chicago Cubs and ask about Jason Hamill, who would be the least expensive of the starting pitchers that they're, that would be available right now. But even then, it's still really a high asking price. Even then, we still have the issue of, the Yankees want to give up prospects from what is generally considered to be a very thin farm system. And I think also the division really hasn't begun to define itself yet, because every team is having problems. And Brian said also that it's even difficult, let alone, guys like Jason Hamill, Jeff Samardzija, it's difficult even to go bottom feeding to find guys. You may have noticed the Oakland Athletics, who are also scrambling for depth in their rotation, despite the fact that they've gotten off to a great start. They claimed Jeff Francis on waivers, who's like a 4A guy. That's right now, teams are just grabbing for starting pitching scraps.
And the thing that's funny, Buster, is that, so many people are reacting that way. I was talking about how in two of the New York tabloids today, two respected writers, they've got to make a trade right away. Well, first of all, they don't have to make a trade right away because they're in first place. And as you just mentioned, the four other teams in the division are all seriously flawed.
Absolutely. And I was around the Red Sox over the weekend. Their offense is a mess to the point that, their veteran players in the clubhouse are talking about, boy, we have to find a way to be more efficient. We have to try to manufacture runs, advance runners, that type of thing. This is a team that outscored every other team last year by 57 runs, and they're 16th in runs scored in baseball now. Jacoby Ellsbury's obviously gone. They're not going to be able to get him back. They're going to still continue to go through a time where they're going to try to integrate some of these younger players into their everyday lineup. The Toronto Blue Jays have all kinds of starting pitching issues. The Tampa Bay Rays internally in the next 2 months will just try to decide if they're good enough to stay in it or if they're just going to put David Price out on the trade market. The Baltimore Orioles might find out sometime in the next 5 weeks that Matt Wieters is going to need season-ending elbow surgery because he's a free agent. After next season, he's going to want to be healthy for next year. Their starting pitching is a mess. So, and really, all around the division, every team is dealing with problems. So when we talk about the Yankees' issues with their starting rotation, which are acute, we got to keep the context in mind.
All right. Clearly, Detroit's the best team in baseball. Clearly. I mean, is there even a close second?
Well, I think Oakland's really good in terms of the overall depth of their roster and the position players. But they are just woefully thin in starting pitching, so that if they get one more injury on top of losing Jared Parker and A.J. Griffin, the house might start to crumble a little bit. And they go into today with the best run differential in baseball at plus 95. They're 28-16. So you give them credit, but if you set aside the run differential, for me, without a doubt, the Tigers are the best team in baseball. And we saw them over the weekend. They have unbelievable starting pitching. We knew going into it. They're settling their bullpen issues. Java Chamberlain's actually throwing the ball really well right now. He worked on his slider earlier. Their lineup is so much more dynamic. And think about this. In the month of May, Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez are each 24 for 64. They're each hitting 375 this month. They lead the American League in stolen bases. Their defense is better. That's the team to beat.
Now, quick aside with the Tigers, why couldn't they get out of Boston last night?
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, as far as I think they're playing in Cleveland tonight, and they still had, as of 6.5 hours, they just landed in Cleveland, so they could not get out last night. I was wondering why.
No, I did not know that, and maybe that explains those suits they handed out to everybody that looked like PJs.
Right, Zubaz. All right, get back to the Yankees for a moment. Let's say they have to make a deal, and they have to make a big deal for a starter, and I'd say you'd push that more toward the end of July, closer to the trade deadline. Who in their system is desired by other teams? Is it Gary Sanchez? Is that about it?
He definitely would be someone who that they would definitely take a look at. When you talk to people with other teams, they talk about the Yankees catching.
Right.
And there definitely are teams out there that are lacking in that. It'd be worth keeping in mind that at some point the Diamondbacks might become sellers, and I know that they don't have a lot to offer. But if somebody got hot, there's a potential match there, I think, with the Diamondbacks. I think the Cubs are at a point where they're, generally speaking, looking for depth, and they'll take anything, for a guy like Jason Hamill. But I really believe this, that when we're talking about a Jeff Samardzija or David Price, who are both eligible for free agency after the 2015 season, so you'd get them for 2 pennant drives, I got to believe that it's going to be competitive, and if it gets competitive, then the Yankees are probably going to lose out.